So welcome everybody. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome you, whether you are here live watching this Zoom or whether you're watching it recorded in our video library. We are thrilled that this is session number 3 of the Reclaim Your Health series. And this is specifically on reclaiming your that certainly I know I'm super excited to learn about. Definitely not my strong point. I am not going to waste time talking, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm Rachel Just. Amazing speakers, Jen and Christine, who I will let reintroduce themselves because they are qualified, they are knowledgeable, they are passionate, they are fun, they are funny, they are wonderful presenters. And this has just been a fantastic series. So looking forward to session number 3. And I'm going to turn it over to you two lovely ladies.
Well, Rachel, thank you for having us, and thank you. Nice to see some new faces and returning faces over the last couple weeks. So thank you all for being here. So for those of you, if you're starting with this video of this series or just checking this off, in isolation. My name is Jen Trepic. My background is really in business and marketing. And I came to all this wellness stuff through my own saga, I call it, of trying to figure out my health and my weight. And in everything I learned, I really became passionate about everybody having access to this information. I really felt like it was what we all deserve to know, but nobody ever taught us. Why isn't this what we learned in health class? I don't know. So I really became an insatiable student and passionate about helping people help themselves with this information. So I became a health coach back in 2007. And, over that time, all of these webinars and the work that Christine and I do with our clients and with pain management and everything, it's really about sharing tools and information so that we can all reclaim our health. And that's really what this series has been about. So we're excited to wrap things up with part 3. Christine, you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, I'm Christine Sapmary. I've been in the, integrative health field for many, many years. Started as a trainer and then went to massage. I have a bird in the background who's decided he's a smoke alarm, so my house is not burning down. It's just the bird, if you can hear him. And in general, so then I went from massage. I got more and more into Chinese medicine, just trying to understand how they think about the body and how they think about health. Took an herbal course, took another massage course, and then finally became an acupuncturist. And so it opened up a door of like ancient healing that I don't still to this day understand how they learned everything they learned, because pretty much the modern science has been confirming that the things that they knew from 200 BC actually are true in terms of how the body functions. They may not have known all the long names of the chemicals and all the long reaction chains and things, but they definitely knew how the body works. So my specialty in acupuncture was always autoimmune. So from that, I understood more about how the proper functioning of the immune system is supposed to be, and then when it goes wrong. So we're going to share some of that with you today. It's a complicated process, just staying healthy, and it's kind of going on even as we sit here right now, which is pretty remarkable. But the general feeling about the immune system is that it should be protecting us. It should not be our enemy. So we're going to cover some of the things we can do to soften some of the overreactions and then kind of churn up some of the reactions that we want from our immune systems.
Yeah, so we often think of our immune system really once we're not well, right? And typically around cold and flu, this time of year, as we're getting into cold and flu season, there's viruses going around. And that's when we typically start to pay attention to our immune system. But as Christine said, it's really functioning all the time, protecting us from things that are coming at us all the time. One of the things that we can notice is when our immune system is maybe on high alert, right? So that can be when we have lots going on, right? When stress is high, our immune system doesn't really function optimally. We might be feeling a little lethargic or weak. Maybe you're having food cravings, right? If you're finding it difficult to motivate yourself or have that like hard time focusing, a little brain fog, some of those things can simply be symptoms of the immune system being more active. And so the sooner that we can start to notice these things, the sooner we can start to support the immune system in doing what it's supposed to do. And in that, we also want to make sure that the way that we're addressing our immune response is not necessarily to dampen it. Sometimes we want it to do its thing and help keep us well. So, Christine, the immune system is a complex network within the body. You want to talk through the different pieces?
Yeah, sure. So we've got our white blood cells. That's when you have a cold, that's really why you get all that mucus. It's the white blood cells are coming in, almost like Pac-Man, that game that we used to play back in the 80s or whenever that was. That it kind of really devours the cells of the pathogen. The pathogen are the bad guys. So pathogens can be viral and bacterial. We'll go over that later. But basically, the white blood cells are like the initial, they call it the innate system that's just there ready to go whenever you're being attacked by, like, you might have gone to an event where someone was coughing in your face, you were on transportation, the train, and again, you might have caught something. So these white blood cells come in to fight it. Then you've got the red blood cells. I think of them more as like filtering. So they filter out any impurities and toxins by way of the liver and the spleen, to kind of just make it that you're not struggling in a lot of different directions. You want your immune system to be focused on the bacteria and the virus and the fungus, those kind of things. And the less that there's an overload of either toxins or impurities in your system, the better chance that you have to fight these things. The complement system, if you think of a cell and then there's the wall of the cell, the complement system is a combination of piercing the wall of the cell. So that's the first step in the complement system. It pierces like almost like a knife going into the wall of the cell. And then all the other parts of the complement system and the immune system go into the inside the bacteria or inside the virus and clean it up and destroy it, basically. So it's kind of, from the inside, that's how that works. So it's a little more complicated, but kind of intriguing. And then you've got the lymph system. So the lymph system, there's a picture of it right there on the right side. It's all over your body. It consists of lymph fluid that flows hopefully through all the different tiny vessels. They're very hair-like, but they clean up all over the body. And then you have, like, when they say lymph nodes, like in your neck and in your groin, and under your arm, those are lymph nodes that can get swollen, which, especially with cancer, that's one of the ways they can detect, is there a swollen lymph node there? Is something happening? Is your body fighting? And most of the times we fight this off, whatever this molecule or pathogen is, the lymph system, as long as it's not overwhelmed. And we're going to talk about that, to make sure that the lymph system is working properly. There's no pump to the lymph system. So the red blood cells have your heart and circulation to pump. The lymph system, the only way you can really get it going is to either move, which that's why, people go on these little trampolines up and down, but just walking to anything that you can do to move will move the lymph system. But massage is another way. So if you're not capable of moving, because, whatever's going on in your health, that not everybody can go out for a walk. So with the lymph system, you can have, and there is such a thing as lymphatic massage, which, if there's swelling after surgery, that's one of the ways to get that swelling to come down. And then you have the spleen, which is actually, kind of on the upper left side of our bodies. A lot of us don't even know where all these organs are. So if you're at a party and people ask you where your spleen is, now it's like on the upper left. And that's where all your T cells and B cells, and I know with COVID, they've been talking about that a lot, that, one of them is to create antibodies, the B cells, and then the T cells really kind of activate the immune system. So they're important for that. And then So the spleen filters the blood, like I said before, mostly the red blood cells, and it activates and produces both the B and T cells. So that's important because you can have B and T cells that are sluggish. That's not going to do you any good. You really need the properties of the spleen and some of the other things too that will activate your immune system. And as Jen said, you don't want to overactivate it. You want it to be, it's like just right, Goldilocks. You want it to be just right. So, and then the last thing is the bone marrow. And again, that produces and stores the red and white blood cells, but it also helps with the B cells too. And those are the antibodies. When people talk about antibodies, it stores B and T cells. It doesn't really produce the T cells. And then these memory cells that there was a controversy in COVID about, well, what about if I've had COVID? Do I need all the boosters? Do I need all the vaccines and things? You know, and it's just a different system of the immune system that these memory cells, once you've had COVID, let's say, you have these B cells and T cells that already have seen what COVID looks like. And so they are more likely to get rid of it before it gets really into a serious case. The controversy was that the COVID was mutating right and left. So, you know, was it as valuable as other immune cells? That's the problem with the flu every year, that you go and get your flu shot. What about these memory cells? Well, the flu might be a little different this year than it was last year. And again, that it kind of migrates into slightly new mutations. So that's just the nature of viruses. So then that's why they're recommending to have the vaccines as a backup. And then the thymus here, this has, by way of hormones, the thymus actually produces these T cells, and those are the ones that activate the immune system. They also have memory T cells. There are natural killer T cells, which are really great for attacking tumors and things. But it also eliminates what I call autoimmune cells, the ones that attack our own body. The thymus is able to figure out which T cells are going to help your body and which ones aren't. So it's really valuable. And I know for some people who are living with autoimmune, you're like, well, how come it didn't do it for me? The thymus over time can lose its pep. And so there are different, it's less active with age too. And one of the things that they recommend is to kind of tap underneath your collarbone, right in the middle there. It's, you know, in terms of science, does it really work? Does it not really work? You know, to me, it's like, some of these things are hard to study. So for me, it doesn't hurt anything, you know, as long as you don't overdo it, because you might get sore. But to tap, you know, right at the top of that sternum there, and just kind of, I would say gently tap, and just kind of think of your thymus and think of activating it, because some of these thoughts, the mind body exercise sometimes can have an effect as well, you know. And the fact that it doesn't hurt, you know, it could be a little woo woo possibly, but for the just in case part of it, you might want to try that.
Yeah, and excuse me, it's interesting because as developed as our immune system is, it's almost secondary to other parts of our immune system, to other barriers. So our bodily fluids, right? So your skin, by the way, your skin is a massive barrier for toxins, right? Our primary defense is the skin. There's actually in the oil of your skin, it's actually almost like antibacterial in our skin oil. Our tears, right? Think about something gets in your eye. Our tears are designed to help flush things out, right? Your lungs, interestingly enough, are also part of this. So, you know, you get like that phlegmy stuff, right? Sometimes it's in our nose, sometimes in the lungs. That phlegm is collecting the particle, whatever it is it's trying to fight, to get it out of our system. So sometimes we want to get that, you know, let the body produce the phlegm to get it out, right? It's all part of the system. So our lungs are critical in that. And then our digestive tract. So this is really the powerhouse of our immune system and our defenses, our barrier. The walls of your digestive tract help ensure that what we need gets out and what we don't need doesn't get out unless we have a permeable, or impaired gut barrier. So, as we think about immune function, that gut barrier is critically important on top of our gut function and what's happening in there. So, we want to make sure that we have prebiotics and probiotics. So, most of us have heard about probiotics, right? They're very popular. Probiotics are the healthy gut bugs that we're looking for. Give us a one in the chat. Have you heard of prebiotics? And then give us a 2 in the chat if you've heard it but don't really know what it is. The prebiotics. Yes, exactly. Okay, so prebiotics are the food for the probiotics. What's that food? Fiber. Fiber is prebiotics, the food for the healthy gut bugs. So, one of the things we'll talk about later on is how we can get more of that prebiotic nutrition to feed the healthy gut bugs, and how we can ensure that we're not giving the food that feeds the gut bugs that we don't want. Right? Really quick, before we get into some of those things, let's talk about germs, because not all germs are the same, right? We've known that for a long time, even without a medical degree. And if you remember, even growing up, it's like, is this a virus? Is this a bacteria? What's happening? And the truth is, things can be bacterial, things can be viral, or things can be both or a combination. So, bacteria we think of with strep throat, whooping cough, right? A urinary tract infection. That's bacteria creating a problem, right? So bacterial infections, we tend to look for antibiotics. Viral infections like the flu don't respond to that. This is, the cold, the flu, a little bit of sore throat. These are the ones where the advice is let it run its course. Rest, chicken soup, right? Like the little things that we do to nurture ourselves and feel better. And then there are some things that are kind of both, like bronchitis or an ear infection, a sinus infection. And so some of those can be caused by virus, some of those can be caused by bacteria. So those scenarios, we need a little bit more information to figure out our best course of action. Christine, what else do we want to talk about here that I'm missing?
Just that there can be secondary infections. So you start out with a viral infection, and because your immune system is trying to figure that out, sometimes things get in the back door. So like also you're kind of weakened now. You're in bed. You're not. You're tired. You're the fatigue is trying to help. You get you force you to rest. And I know some of us don't take the message, and we still, forge on. But the secondary infection, like all of a sudden your sinuses, this would be an example, like your sinuses were clear fluid when you were blowing your nose. Then they started to get white when you blow your nose. Then you get all the rainbows. So now you've got green and yellow. That's when you know you have a secondary infection. And that's when you want to add in the antibiotics. So sometimes it's not either, or it can be either or, like pneumonia can be either bacterial or viral, but it's also one stacked on top of the other. And so that's something for you to look out for, that you would want. And there are some doctors, they used to do it where they would give you kind of prophylactic antibiotics that would say, well, you have this viral infection, we don't want you to get the secondary infection. So they would give them to you to prevent. But these days, because antibiotics are not having the responses as much as they used to when they were new to us, now we've got resistance to them. I don't think most doctors are doing that the same way. They actually wait for you to have that secondary infection. So that's why I think these urgent care places are so popular now, because you can just walk in and get a test and say, what do I have? Is it the flu? Is it a cold? Is it a virus? Is it a bacteria? And so hopefully, you'll get the right advice.
So let's talk about what we might be having that's fueling the bacteria. or fueling the gut bugs that we don't want to have proliferating. So, highly processed foods, sugar, grains like gluten containing grains, even for some of us, even just grains in general, even if they don't have gluten, and dairy can feed that bacteria. By the way, dairy creates mucus. Frankly, for all of us, whether we have a lactose challenge or not. So, thinking about how you're feeling and what's going on, dairy might be one of those things that we say, you know what? Not right now. Let's see if I can feel a little bit better. All of these highly processed, sugar laden foods feed the gut bacteria that we don't want. And those gut bacteria start to crave that food. So you can experience those cravings, but it's actually those gut bugs having those cravings. So it's an interplay. We don't always know so clearly whether that's us craving it because we're looking for some comfort because we don't feel 100%, or if it's those gut bugs. But either way, minimizing or eliminating some of these foods, especially when we're in a time of challenged immune function or we're really looking for our immune system to show up strongly, these are pieces that are very much within our control that we can start to play with. Tools in that tool belt, as we often say. So then what foods do we want? Now, a lot of these you have heard of, right? Vitamin C for the immune system. We have known about this since we were kids, right? It was why, I don't know, when I was growing up, it was all about the balanced breakfast that had the glass of OJ, right? For your vitamin C. So, just like for those of you who were here last week, we talked about eating the whole food. That is certainly what we want to do here also, because eating the whole food gives us the fiber that's the prebiotic for those healthy gut bugs. But there's lots of other foods that also give us vitamin C. Vitamin C is critical for the immune system. It helps increase B and T cells. It helps our body fight whatever is coming at us. Now, the interesting thing about vitamin C is, well, two things. One, in the research, we really only need about 200 milligrams. So we do pee out any vitamin C that we don't absorb in the moment. So it might make sense to have these things throughout the day, but it's not necessarily that we need to go hog wild and hyperdose vitamin C. By the way, if you are, you will likely see some loose stool or increased elimination. So that's how we can sort of tell our vitamin C, if we're kind of in that Goldilocks sweet spot there too. And then zinc is an interesting one. Christine, you want to talk about zinc? Because do we want to take zinc all the time or just sometimes?
No, and then we'll talk about echinacea after this as well. And so there are things that you want to do. What I say when you're coming down with something, you feel like it's not even the point where you have the sore throat already. It's just like I think most of us can tell when you're just a little off. Like sometimes like we talked about mood these last couple of weeks, sometimes it's just your mood out of the blue. You're just feeling a little bit sluggish or a little bit negative or something. And it's actually telling you that a bug is trying to get in there. So zinc and echinacea, because in Chinese medicine, they cool you off. And so you don't want to be cold, in your body. There's a whole slew of things that heat up the body. There are other things that cool off the body. And again, we want balance. And coldness in Chinese medicine means lack of movement. You don't want lack of movement in terms of the immune system. So many of the things we've been talking about activate the immune system, which is basically what they would call heat. So zinc cools you off. So what it does is it for temporarily, bacteria especially, they don't like a cold environment. So if you're just coming down with something, that's when you would take some of these formulas that are for cold and flu. But if you take it all the time, now you're making your whole body sluggish, and that's not what we want. We want, most of the time we want things to be moving around. So that's where zinc comes in.
And we can get enough zinc if we add some of these foods to our regular rotation. We can get the zinc we need. And then, as Christine was saying, if we feel something coming on, we can kind of level up in there. Now, probiotics, we talked about this. We've heard about these. A lot of people take probiotics. One of the things that we want to focus on, in addition to the probiotics, are the prebiotics. So, eating the fruits and vegetables, all the things for the vitamin C are going to give us prebiotic fiber. All of the fruits and vegetables that we eat help give the food for the probiotics. Now, you don't have to take a probiotic in order to get probiotics or support the healthy gut bugs. We can think of fermented foods.
Mhm.
Make sure if you're purchasing sauerkraut or kimchi, make sure when you read the label that they are actually fermented. A lot of them mass produced are pickled instead of fermented. Those pickled options are going to taste the same, but are not going to give us those probiotic benefits. So we can look to some of these food products to have around. They're great to just mix into everything we're eating anyway. And vitamin E. Now, vitamin E is interesting. I think it's often overlooked. Vitamin E in research has been shown to increase the percentage of T cells. And similar to the vitamin C, we don't necessarily have to go hog wild. If I recall, the research shows about 15 milligrams of vitamin E. So we can get that through our food choices with some of these quality fats. And again, more of those vegetables that are going to give us that prebiotic fiber. So almonds, sunflower seeds, spinach, broccoli, tomatoes, avocados. By the way, this is a great slide to take a photo of or to go back when you're watching the recording so that you have these foods. They're not exhaustive food lists, but they start to give us an idea of some of the things that we can add into the mix to level up the support for our immune system for all of that function. Anything we can do that helps our gut is going to inherently help our immune system. And the more that we can do it with some of these options, like the vitamins, like the probiotics and the prebiotics, we allow it to self-modulate in a way that often pharmaceuticals or other options can sort of artificially push it into other directions. So that's sort of what Christine was saying with something like the echinacea. It's maybe a little more extreme that we use in certain scenarios versus these options that we can look at for more all the time. Christine, anything else on this that I missed?
I would say just also in general, like when you think of the immune system, think of your whole body, not just your digestive tract. That's really important. But if you think of every cell in your body getting the nutrients that it needs, getting the sunlight that it needs, getting the movement that it needs, like there's so many sleep, we talked about stress, we've talked about our moods, all those things. If you think of yourself as like, it's supposed to be now that the doctors are thinking of you as a whole person, which is kind of ironic that it took them this long to attach that terminology. But when they talk about patient-centered care, whole person care, that all these things, biopsychosocial, all these things are supposed to be how you're being treated. If you're not being treated like that, then you have to say, okay, how can I maybe even substitute myself being my own inner healer, that sometimes we have to take things into our own hands, that the whole person that you are, which includes all these aspects that I just mentioned, the more healthy you are, the less you're going to, succumb to some of these pathogens. They'll go elsewhere. They're not interested in you if you have all these defenses in place. So if you can, to switch your thinking about somebody else is going to do this for me and think, oh, maybe I can do some of this myself.
Awesome. So let's think about some of the other lifestyle things that we can do that support our immune system. So hydration is critical, right? We were talking about fluids as being one of our body's defenses. So hydration is about more than just water. So we'll talk about that in a second, but fluids. Remember when we were a kid and it was like tons of fluids to flush everything out, right? That still applies. And the interesting thing about hydration is more than just water. Hydration is really minerals. So minerals can come from the foods that we eat. Minerals can come from salt. We want to choose a mineral dense salt like a Celtic sea salt or a dark Himalayan sea salt. Um, a lot of times we will have symptoms or signs of stuff going on that can really be linked back to that lack of hydration throughout the body. So staying hydrated is critically important, especially, tangent, but travel, right? Different weather, especially when we're about to head into a season with indoor heat and all of that stuff that can be very drying. All of that hydration is important. We talked a lot more about activity and movement in part 2 when we talked about mood. But as Christine mentioned, our lymph system doesn't have a pump. So all of that activity that we can do supports the lymph system, helps flush that out, right? So that the lymph fluid and the toxins don't get stuck in our system. And that becomes critically important. So any kind of movement that we can do, blood flow to circulate all of those immune cells, the B cells, the T cells, the white blood cells, the red blood cells, right? Everything we want circulating. And that oxygen. By the way, the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. So the more activity we can do to where we're flooding our body with oxygen, deep breathing, giving our body oxygen helps the immune system, helps every single piece of our body function well.
The only thing I would add in is that in terms of hydration, I know some people just don't like the taste of water, and depending on where you live, what the taste of the water is in the pipes and things. If you add lemon, since we're on the immune system, if you add lemon to the water, that actually it dissolves phlegm. So since we're talking about that, you can make a tea, like make your own tea and have a version of iced tea, again, without too much sugar, but put a lot of lemon in there. And then you'll realize that, some of the stuffy nose and the throat, the postnasal drip in the back of your throat that you're always clearing your throat, that some of that lemon can actually dissolve some of that. So if you're having that as an ongoing issue, it's just another tip to put into your toolbox.
Excellent. We have a question that came in the chat. Is yogurt not dairy? So yogurt is dairy. So for some people, and depending on where you are, yogurt may be one of those things that you're opting out of. And also, not all yogurt is fermented. So there's also a difference there. So choosing the dairy product, if it works for you, like kefir is a fermented dairy product that might work for you. And that's a little bit different than, even like your Greek yogurt and some of those things. So a lot of this differs person to person, right? You'll know. Like people will always say, well, give me the list. And I often say, we can have the general list, but you will know what agrees with you and what doesn't. It tends to be the things that we naturally gravitate to or away from. So pay attention to that. It's valuable, right? And we also know if we're just, being a little bit cranky, or if as an adult, we're like, this does not agree with me, right? We know the difference. So is iodine important in salt? So this will depend who you ask. There is some research that a lot of people are extremely deficient in iodine, which can impair thyroid function. That's part of why iodine, like when the salt is refined, they sometimes add iodine into that. I much prefer the Celtic sea salt or the pink Himalayan sea salt. And then you can do some testing if you want to as well. The lactic-free Greek yogurt, I think you might mean lactose. And with some of those yogurts, just double check. So some of the lactose-free or dairy alternative yogurts are made out of nuts or nuts and seeds. And that can be helpful. They're not fermented. They are not giving us the things that we're looking for there. And they have a different macronutrient balance than what we typically think we're getting from yogurt. So, that's potentially a whole topic for another series. We could do things on nutrition and nutrients and reading labels and all that kind of stuff. But take a look at those labels and make sure you know what you're actually getting from a lot of those products, especially the plant-based options, the dairy alternatives, and especially even we talked about grains and gluten before. Just because something is gluten-free doesn't mean it's inherently a more healthful choice than something that does have gluten. So again, this comes down to a little bit of that individual variation for what's going to work for you.
We in Chinese medicine, we had three things. It was orange juice, chicken, and dairy were the three questions you would ask yourself, because everyone is different. That if, an hour or two after you've had one of those three things, if you get congested, that might be something, again, to think put it in your toolbox, and it's not to say like, if you're out to have breakfast or brunch or something, and then you have some orange juice, you get a little stuffy later, to that you would never have orange juice, but at least it's related to how you work, and everyone's different. So you can't say eliminate orange juice, eliminate chicken, eliminate all dairy. When I was a runner many, many years ago, and they told me to eliminate dairy because it would make me stuffed up, I was probably so dehydrated at the time that actually some of the fluids from the dairy that, was trying to produce phlegm, it didn't really work. I didn't have any phlegm, but I was feeling moist, so I was using it as drinking. It was almost like drinking more water, when I had my dairy. So that, that depends on your lifestyle, depends on who you are, depends on what treatments you've had. And so it's just to be on the alert, as Jen said before, how do these foods react to you? And it could be the next day. With gluten, it's really tricky because it can be a few days later where all of a sudden your knees start to get swollen or you start having foggy brain or something. So gluten is not a good one to get immediate responses, but some of these other foods you can tell right away.
Yeah, a lot of those sensitivities, allergies can show up even up to 3 days later.
Yeah.
So if you suspect that, tracking the food, because we think we think we're going to remember. We're not. We don't. 3 days later, we have that recency bias, right? Where we think anything that we're responding to is because of what we just had. It not always is the case. Yep. So, all right, maybe we're in a place where we want to level up against some of these germs and, take it up a level. So this is where we can look to some targeted supplementation. So beta glucans come from mushrooms, and there's a lot of supplementation that uses mushrooms or specifically beta glucans to help support the immune system. Echinacea, Christine talked about, and I want to focus on vitamin D and aloe for a second. So vitamin D, don't quote me on this, but I believe there was research a few years ago that showed vitamin D protects 1 in 3 from seasonal cold and flu. The immune system, 1 in 4. So there's some value in having vitamin D as part of your repertoire. Every single cell in your body has a vitamin D receptor. So when we think about that, really, as Christine said, asking the question, could this hurt me? Most people are deficient in D, and it is used by every single cell in the body. There's some value there in recognizing what vitamin D can do, especially with our immune system. And then aloe, we were talking before about the gut lining, right? And how important that is to be able to let things out that are supposed to, but not let things out that are not supposed to, and not let things come in, right? Aloe, so think about, ever had a sunburn? right? You put aloe on your skin when you have a sunburn. Drinking aloe, not the same aloe, don't start drinking that gel, but aloe juice, aloe drinks, think about what it does for your skin. It's like it can do that to our GI tract. So from throat to tail, we can support that gut barrier with aloe juice. Now, like everything in the supplementation space, we have to be careful because technically they could give you a bottle of water with 1 drop of 100% aloe juice and sell it to you as 100% aloe juice. So we want to make sure that it's a highly potent, high quality aloe juice that can really effectively help to heal that gut barrier. It also supports anti-inflammatory activity. It is, Christine, it's 2 out of the 3, antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal. Which 2 is it?
It turns out they've researched it even more than the old days.
And it's all 3?
All of them, yeah. And they're also saying anti-tumor, and that it also increases antioxidants. We haven't really talked about antioxidants, but that's kind of what I mentioned in the very beginning, that if you have an overload of toxins or negative substances in your body that you're constantly struggling with, which could come in by, pollutants in the air possibly, or different side effects of the things that you're digesting if they're not, healthy quality. So you don't want to overload. And so these antioxidants actually make unstable molecules that can be very dangerous stable again. They bind to them. And so aloe is, that's one of the things that aloe does. So it's anti-tumor, antifungal, which is fungus, antiviral, antibacterial, and it lowers inflammation. So remember I said before that you want to modulate the immune system, that it's not too high or too low. The too high, if you think back to that slide that we had with the skin, there are histamines in the skin, and it's very related to the digestive tract, that it's an allergy that you might have on your skin, which would look like a rash, which I'm sure some of you have had rashes like that, especially as children, we get these rashes. That's when the immune system is overreacting. It's thinking that everything is dangerous and that it produces either a rash, or like if it's in your a breathing apparatus, that you'd be sneezing, or there's just all different ways, and the digestive tract as well. If there are things that are perceived to be dangerous, the problem is they're not always dangerous. So that's why people go and get these shots when they when they can identify what it is that they're allergic to. So then the reaction isn't an overreaction. You want a proper reaction for these things. So aloe can do that in terms of reducing some of this inflammation. That's like, it's like a hyper immune system.
Yep. So great questions coming in. How much aloe should one take? What form is safe? So there's a couple specific aloe products that I can recommend if you want to reach out to us. You want to make sure one of the ones that's a drink has the lanolin removed so that it doesn't create diarrhea or loose stool. And then how much depends on what part of the GI tract we're looking to address. So if you think about, throat to tail as like a hose with holes in it, if we want to get stuff down to the intestine, we need more than if we're looking to just address like the throat and the vocal cords, right? So to get something down, you might need like 6 ounces at a time. One of the things that we also do that I've done with some of my clients who are specifically looking to address things is that we put some aloe in their water and they drink it all day, all the time. Mm-hmm. So use a couple ounces in a bottle of water, and then we're giving that to them, all the time, and it's helping repair the GI tract there. And then there was another question about gluten-free. So it says, what if you're allergic to gluten-free, then what? So this is an interesting question. We might need to speak offline. So gluten-free, typically gluten-free products typically use grains that don't have gluten. So like rice, for example, So is your allergy to rice? Is your allergy to additives that are often put into gluten-free products? So if you have a problem with the gluten-free options, you could certainly choose grains that have gluten. Or one of the things that we typically recommend, because of the strain on our system from grains in general and the quality of the grain that is typically accessible in this country, you might want to opt out of grains so that we can get to some better function and then see if we can add them back in without symptoms. So no, do not cut up an aloe plant.
Yeah.
That's going to give you a lot of things that you don't want to eat. So there are specifically aloe juices. So if you want to send us a message after, we can send you, I can send you a link to a couple different aloe products that are safe and effective. And then that kind of brings us to the Christine, anything else here on some of these supplements before we just Q&A at all?
No. Well, the vitamin D, it's when I was saying that I specialize in autoimmune, that vitamin D is one of the ones that helps to lower the autoimmune response. So if you are dealing with that, the vitamin D will help that. It's also anti-inflammatory, but it does boost the immune system. So it's kind of interesting, like some of these parts of the immune system are specifically designed to make sure that you're not attacking your own body, and they actually get rid of those. Like when it's a T cell, let's say, they get rid of the T cells that are too hyperactive and only allow the ones that are going to protect you. So I mean, the intelligence of the immune system, it to me is mind-boggling. If we had people that were as smart, I think this world would be a better place. That's all I have
Yeah,
to say.
exactly. Yeah, so vitamin D is very much what we would call a modulator of the immune system. It's kind of playing with the volume controls.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to move this forward as we tackle some of the questions that are coming in the chat. This QR code allows you to schedule 15 minutes with Christine and I. So if that's interesting, some specific questions, you can use that. And I know Rachel also mentioned at our last one, you can email her if that QR code doesn't work for you. She'll send you that link.